Welcome to the Monday Monologue. Well, today I want to talk about the importance or the lack of importance on the measurements that we do on this channel and the difference between objective and subjective reviewing, which I do both on the products that I look at or review. And I know there's a lot of YouTube stereo audiophile reviewers that just do subjective reviewing. And that's fine. I mean, at the end of the day, that's what most people end up doing. And as part of the channel, I also do my subjective reviews about what I think stuff sounds like and whether I like it or not. Now, just because I don't like it doesn't mean that you're not going to like it or that it might be the best thing you've ever heard and I don't like it at all. And I try to back up my subjective reviews by what I see in the measurements. And if you looked at my clips review, you'll realize that what I like and what sounds good to me actually measured much worse than the speaker that I didn't like. So this isn't all about me just going, oh, well, this measured this and so it's good, or this measures that and so it's bad. It's about being able to interpret those results, and you as a viewer have to take some responsibility in looking at the objective reviews and the measurements that are made on this equipment and deciding if it makes sense for your use. And I'm going to use that little deckware UFO amp that people are just almost like cultish about. If you've got what I call mainstream speakers that are in the 88 to 92 or 3 dB, maybe even up to 95 dB speakers, and you've got a fairly large room, like my listening room or where I have my stereo set up is about 150 square feet, something like that. It's got kind of an extension wing that goes back from there that's probably another 100 square feet, but the main listening area is pretty small. And so I'm sitting probably 6 feet or so, 6 to 8 feet, more like 8 feet probably from the speakers. And so I don't need real loud speakers and they don't need to be super efficient. I mean, those dB ratings are measured at 3 feet and I'm like twice that, maybe a little more away from the speaker. And so a 92 decibel speaker, and I'm listening usually around the mid 80s to 88 decibel sound pressure levels as I've measured in my room. That's about as loud as I get. So most amps I'm using maybe a watt, maybe 2 at the most. 1.5 is probably the max. And so I don't need super efficient speakers. I don't need 100 dB speakers to fill up the space that I listen in. And so you folks that are saying, oh, you need La Scalas or you need, Chorus 2s or some other super efficient speaker. I've got a pair of Chorus 2s that a viewer gave me that I had to take 3/4 of the furniture out of my living room to even be able to place them. And then they're way too close to me to actually be able to enjoy them. They just run you out of the room, even at very low sound pressure levels, and you don't get a good balance between the treble and the bass. And so it just is all top end because you're too close to those horns. You need to be, I think, 10 or 15 feet away from speakers like that to really be able to enjoy listening to them and to get them to balance back out. And so I don't know how many of you folks out there have 10,000 square foot houses with 1,000 square foot living room that you've got your speakers in with 20-foot vaulted ceilings. That's going to be a whole different use case than what my house is. And I have to just go by my own house. I don't have the ability or really the desire to go set up sound systems in some rich guy's house that's got a giant living room with vaulted ceilings, you have to figure that out for yourself. And hopefully you guys are smart enough to be able to realize that, hey, I've got a different room than Skunky does. And so I've got a different use requirement. And I can use big tower speakers because there's a space in my room. I need little bookshelf speakers, and I've got to try to make them work right because I also, entertain guests and have, folks come over and watch TV where we're not even using the stereo, and I don't want the room to be just a dedicated stereo listening room. And even then, it's really too small for a lot of these giant speakers that some of you guys are suggesting that I need to have to be able to do legit stereo reviews. And the other thing, obviously, I think this is a really budget-oriented channel. I mean, $75 output transformers, or what, maybe $100 output transformers, or what I use in most of my projects. You don't see me building projects with Lindell and ISO Tango $1,000 a piece output transformers, or those silver wire type that are $2,000 a piece. That's not what this channel's about. And I'm sure there's other channels out there that can show you and demo $35,000 speaker cables and that sort of stuff if that's what you're into. But that's not what this channel's about. I'm trying to show you guys how to, for maybe under $5,000 all in, put together a really killer sounding tube audio system, which a lot of people would say that's impossible, that you need $15,000 speakers or $5,000 speakers anyway. And I just don't think that's the case, especially if you don't have a giant room that you're trying to fill with sound. So that kind of covers the subjective side. So let's look at the objective review. And I'm going to use that little Deckware amp as an example. Okay? You read the manufacturer's specs in the manual that comes with the $3,500 unit, because they don't talk about distortion numbers in anywhere else except that one manual. And they're agreeing that you're going to see probably 6% distortion at max volume, but that at lower volume levels you're going to see less. Okay? So I was going to be buying one of those amplifiers and wanted to really make it sound good. You start with the size of your room. What kind of speakers will fit in your room and can get enough room between you and the speaker for them to actually work correctly. Second, what's the dB rating of those speakers? And then 3, what's the sound pressure level that you want in the room? So if I want 85 dB sound pressure level, and I want to use that little Deckware amp, I'm going to insist on something that's 105 decibel rated efficiency so that I can use it at less than a watt. And then if you look at the curves that I published in the video, you can go across with the THD and up with the power, say, I'm going to probably be using about 3/4 of a watt. And right there, it's making about 2% distortion. I'd have to look at the chart again. And 2% distortion on a tube amp is going to sound good. There's nothing wrong with that. And especially if you really are looking for that tube sound, that warmth, that kind of harmony that they have, you want to have the amp operating in the range where it's going to have 1 to 2% harmonic distortion. You don't want less than that. So you don't want something like this amp with the negative feedback hooked up, where at that wattage you're going to have less than 0.5% distortion. It's not going to have that warm tube sound with that setup. You need less efficient speakers that are going to be using 2 to 3 watts of the power of this. And you might even want to disconnect the global negative feedback to try to get some more distortion at the power level you're using. If you haven't seen it, go back and look at the color preamp video that I did. For you guys that think that I'm all about measurements, I show you guys how to build a preamp that's got adjustable harmonic distortion to inject into the signal to get it to sound good at whatever wattage and sound pressure levels that you need out of an amplifier, even a solid state one. So I'm telling you guys that for good, nice tube sound that really has that, almost reverb kind of cool sound to it, you want 1 to 2% distortion. And the reason that I was saying that Deckware 84 UFO amp isn't really a mainstream product like I was kind of hoping it was going to be is it's designed for people that are using those super high efficiency speakers and you're never going to use past the first watt. And to that use, I'm sure it sounds great. But I can't put those kind of speakers in my house, and so for me, it doesn't have a lot of use. I need an amp that at that 1.5 watt level is at 2% distortion, not 4. And I hope that makes sense. And I hope this gets some of you thinking that you're going to have to figure this out for yourself. I can't tell you what you need in your room or what's going to sound good. Then the other thing that you've got to take into consideration is what's your age? And any of you guys that are 60 plus years old and are trying to pretend like you've got golden years like an 18-year-old, that just ain't happening. That's human biology is shown that most people, when they get to that age, which is a big section of the demographics that watch my videos, we've got nothing past 10K. And so for us to even be looking at what's this system doing at 10 to 20K, who cares? Maybe your neighbors will hear it, but you're not going to. You need to focus on the range that your hearing's working in. And a lot of that depends too on how many concerts have you gone to? How many times have you sat drinking beer, jamming, sitting right in front of the speaker? I know I've done that quite a bit when I was in my 20s. And like your job, if you've got a job where you're working, you used to work at an automotive body shop kind of thing as a estimator, and I was around air grinders and all kinds of super loud noise all day long. And I know that's destroyed some of my hearing. I can't help that. I can't pretend like that I've got 18-year-old hearing. And so when I say that this sounds good to me, you have to look at the measurements too. And that's why I include them. Because you've got no idea of what I'm hearing or what sounds good to me. The other thing that influences what sounds good to us is where we've gone and listened to live music. I mean, if we spend a lot of time at a club where the DJ or the band had the bass cranked up to the moon, then that's what's going to sound good to us, because that's going to re-trigger those memories of listening to that music previously, and you're going to go, yeah, that sounds right. Or somebody else that was listening in a totally different environment to the live music would go, ooh, that doesn't sound right at all. And so you have to temper all of that with the personal preference from our life experiences on the venues that we've listened to music and how that impacts the way we tune things to sound good to us. And we're all different. Like I said, if you look at the frequency response curve that came out of my RP600Ms the way I have them in my house, it's got just a massive spike around 80 hertz. But to me, that sounds awesome, because I remember listening to music in the clubs where they had the bass EQ'd up for people to party on the dance floor with. And so that's what it takes for it to sound like what I remember listening to that music when it sounded best to me. and it re-triggers those memories of being in those spaces with my friends and having a good time. And that's what makes it enjoyable. And so we're all different on that. So you have to take all of that into consideration, and you have to think about that when you're working through your own system, trying to get it to sound good to you. And by sounding good to you, a viewer put this very succinctly: if it sounds so good to you that you want to sit there and keep listening to it, then you've got the right setup. If it's not fatiguing and puts a smile on your face when you hear it, it maybe triggers some fond memories of, days, years ago, then that's what this is all about. So again, I do want to clarify that this is not all about measuring. But I will add a disclaimer or put a pin in that statement saying that if I'm measuring hard clipping, or I'm measuring like a massive spike frequency roll off or something like that, where there's a giant 10 decibel hole in the sound somewhere, I'm going to say that that cannot sound good. And especially hard clipping. No amp, I don't care if it's a tube amp or what it is, no amp sounds good when it's hard clipping. And so if I'm measuring something like the Rysong A50 and it's hard clipping at 2 watts, I'm going to tell you that's a 2 watt amplifier for the very reason that if you know you need 4 watts or 5 watts, and that's why you're buying a 300B amp versus an EL34 amp, you're not getting what you're paying for. And it's not going to work right in your system. Now, if you've got some 100 dB speakers that you need less than 1 watt to drive, I think it's disingenuous to listen to speakers like that in a space that would allow those speakers to work well as a way of reviewing an 8 watt amplifier when you're using 0.8 watts of it. That you should be using what it is designed as to make a subjective review of it, because otherwise you're assuming that everyone's got this special use case that you're doing. And for the most part, back to the deckware, they do say that, this is a special use case. And I want to, reiterate that is a very special use case amplifier that takes a very special setup for it to work right. But if you follow that formula, I have no doubt that it sounds good. And I could hear that at lower volume levels, even with my Klipsch RP600Ms, that there was something nice about the way that amp sounded. But then when I started turning it up to the sound pressure levels that I'm used to, it was using too many watts of the power and was driving it into the area where it doesn't sound good. Which I thought I clearly explained that, but people still keep coming back and saying, oh, well, if you had these speakers, it's like, I get that, but I don't. And like I said, I've got some Klipsch choruses sitting upstairs I'm trying to find a home for that just don't work in my house. And I've tried them. Trust me, I wanted them to work, but they just don't. Just like I really wanted those RP600 M2s to sound better than my old ones. Because it was like I was really looking forward to, this is going to be a new, step up, a little improvement in my system. And it just wasn't to me. So, anyway, kind of been ranting along on this. Hopefully that all makes some sense. Maybe it's all babble. I don't know. But hope you enjoyed watching this Monday monologue. I did make another decision. I know I talked to you about doing some camera stuff on this channel because that's the other big passion of mine. And the more I think about it, the more I need to just separate my photography camera stuff onto my other sister channel, which I'm going to link below. I think that diluting this channel with anything beyond audio gear is probably a bad idea. And If that other channel takes off, it does. If it doesn't, I'm still going to enjoy putting out some information that I know about these old videos so other people can learn some of the history of this stuff that I've got stored up here in my head and get it on tape somewhere. One favor you can do for me, for all you guys that are big fans of my channel, even if you're not interested in camera gear, go over and sub to the channel. It doesn't cost anything. It'll help get that channel rolling, and it'll help me know I made the right decision by separating the two hobbies into two separate channels. If I can get 1,000 subs over there, then that channel can start monetizing and rolling, and I can start feeling like that there's enough people interested in it to maybe go out and do some live interviews at camera shops and just do some different stuff on that channel than I do on this tube channel. So anyway, I think that kind of covers things. You may be looking at what's going on here. I did finally figure out what's going on with the R300, the issues with the frequency response and that crazy square wave and the giant dip. It's the output transformers. I breadboarded these little $75 Ed cores in and it fixed it. And so we're going to move forward with these now that I know what's going on with it. I was definitely baffled. It's a pretty complex schematic, and I want to honor what Wilsonton asked me to not share the schematic. And I know some of y'all are like, please share it. It's like, I promised Mason I wouldn't do it. The guy I've been dealing with named Mason Wilsonton. And I don't know if he's one of the owners or what. This China hi-fi guy, it's complicated. Though there's a totally separate group of people that are doing the retailing, and those are the people that have been attacking me, where this Mason Wilsonton guy is the guy that sent me the R300 and has been working with me and sent me a schematic for this, and we've been talking back and forth. And so two different groups of people. I'm going to stick with dealing with the guy I've been dealing with. He seems super nice and genuine, and hopefully they can get me one of the new all-black R300s that supposedly have some of these issues resolved. I'm really hoping that they change the output transformers ahead of me discovering this. And then, they supposedly got the power supply worked out. They're sending them out with 5 AR4s like I suggested, and he was appreciative of that. And also want to try to get the 411, I think it is, the big giant amp they make. I'm going to see if they'll send me one of those. And they also have a little EL34 amp that I think could be an interesting little guy. I know people are buying the R8 and then putting EL34 tubes in it, and possibly the little EL34 just that doesn't run the higher watt tubes, it's a little lower watt amp, might be all people need. And I'll be curious to see what that's all about. So anyway, thanks all you guys for being loyal subscribers and loyal viewers. That really means a lot to me. We're moving past 10K subs, which is huge to me. That really shows me that I must be doing something right, that this many people like watching my stuff. Thanks to all you Patreon folks that make donations at my website. I super appreciate you guys. I know I don't list your names and stuff like some people do, but yeah, I know who you are. Really appreciate all that. And thanks to you folks that trust me with your gear, especially these guys that have been patient. This guy with this R300, it's been months, and he hadn't said, hey, where's my amp? What's going on? Really appreciate that. And I'll see you next week for the Monday Monologue.